Because you're jumping back into the gap.
Hey coach, welcome to the Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Oliver. I appreciate you joining us for this week's podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit basketballimmersion.com for more coaching resources and access to all the basketball podcasts. I hope you will give us a shout out on social media, on Twitter at @BBallImmersion, or on Instagram at @BasketballImmersion to help me continue to share the game. Enjoy the episode. Excited today to welcome David Thorpe to the podcast. David Thorpe is a renowned coach, analyst, mentor, and writer throughout the NBA with over 20 years of experience. He was an ESPN analyst for 10 years and also wrote a book called Basketball is Jazz, Stories and Lessons from a Basketball Lifer. He now writes an NBA blog on truehoops.com about all things NBA. He's also worked with top NBA talents throughout the league, coaching them through skills training. Last I checked, Coach, 80 plus NBA players, all-stars, lottery picks, and Olympic captains. That's pretty good. And that's all through the Pro Training Center and all the work that he's done through the years. Coach, honored to have you on the podcast.
I appreciate being here. It's always good to talk to people that are more like me than the average basketball fan. So thanks for having me.
Well, we align with a lot of things, and I'm excited to get into one of the topics, which is this concept of recruiting great kids with potential, or selecting. It doesn't have to be necessarily recruiting at certain levels, but selecting great kids with potential and then developing them. And it seems like, Coach, the part that a lot of people miss is that we can develop them, right?
I mean, that's what I've been doing my whole career on. You know, I've been writing about this and talking about this for a long time, but I would tell you that I recently read a book called The MVP Machine. A really phenomenal writer, The New Yorker, named Louisa Thomas, sent it to me. And she said, when I read this book, I heard your voice in my head because it's kind of stuff you always talk about. And it's a baseball book. It has nothing to do with basketball. I don't think our sport's ever mentioned once. But when you read it, you realize the Major League Baseball is a decade ahead of the NBA and our sport in general in terms of understanding not just how to develop players, and I don't mean just pitchers, but hitters too, but in terms of how to value development. That's what we're so far behind. So, 25 years to college coaches who will check in with me more so years ago than now because I don't pay as much attention locally to high school kids now. They want to know about this player, that player that are so-called high majors. And I always say to them, you're going to end up recruiting one of those guys and signing it, but you'll lose to a team that's just tougher than yours. And you're passing up on kids that have lower ceilings and higher floors, but are just tougher and less risk. And you just ignore them. And they go to a smaller school than yours and kick your ass in the NCAA tournament. So I think that we're way behind, Chris, in terms of understanding how we play jazz with 5-on-5. And we get focused on finding the Derrick Roses and Russell Westbrooks and LeBron James. And I think it's a huge mistake that teams make.
Well, and it speaks to the fact that as coaches, we're really good at pointing out what's wrong with players. And we're less effective sometimes at developing what they're not good at or what they can do better that they already do well. And that's what player development speaks about, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, so you hit on something that's pretty damn important to me, which is that focus on what they're doing wrong. I just yesterday was talking to an owner of a high-level team in a very, very good international league. And the owner of the team likes a player that I suggested to him that I don't work with. It's just someone that I know about for next year's team. And he sent it to his general manager, who was a former player in that very big league, very famous league overseas. And then the owner sent back the screenshot of what the GM sent him, which was basically, the kid's really small and there is some degree of success for players that size in our league, but he better be a pretty special player to be able to move the needle for our team. Well, we're talking about high-level professional basketball. Are you saying that if he was 3 inches taller, he'd have to be so special to make a difference? Like, it's crazy talk to me. We're all looking for special people, right? And at every degree, until you get to the highest levels of the league, the NBA, you aren't going to get the guy you think you're going to get. You're going to keep trying. You're going to keep trying. And you're going to pass up on a lot of other kids that can help you win games. And when you finally have to give up on the guy that you're chasing, you're never going to get, that you didn't get, you're going to settle for someone far lower on your list. That doesn't mean he can't help you win. To me, it's a process problem because you've wasted weeks, months going after a kid you have no chance of getting and losing lots of other guys in the process. And also what you haven't been doing a whole lot is player development. And that's where I feel like, and again, this is what I've focused on my whole career is, I built my reputation originally on guys like Udonis Haslam that went undrafted. In 2002, we went undrafted. I trained at the beginning summer of 03, and he's still playing in the NBA. We're in 2021. And I had GM tell me in my face he'd never make it. I had the Heat former GM, Randy Funn, tell me he'll probably never dress for a game. This was before he was a rookie, when he just signed for like $75,000 minimum for a guarantee around just 75 grand. And so the reality is people are wrong all the time. It's hard to project the future. I get that. And I actually give speeches to CEOs about that exact idea. If you look at the history of television, the Hollywood movies, like almost every blockbuster, almost every gigantic TV show, no one thought would be successful. And it was almost made by accident, and yet it worked out great. I think basketball players and basketball programs, we have similar stories we can tell. But I think it's because the process is bad. And if we focus more on, okay, I'm going to take you faults and all because of your work ethic, because of your attitude. Maybe you're already a great athlete without skill. Maybe you're a great athlete, great skill, no clue how to play. Like you can subtract any of those assets, but develop them. Now, if a guy's missing all three things, don't recruit him. But if he's got one of three or two of three, well, it's your job to do the rest and coach him up and value that. And I just don't think, I wrote an article today on truth.com about at the trade deadline, all these NBA teams would love to add elite level talent, and they're ignoring all the tough guys that they could get. Meanwhile, Alex Caruso with an enormous impact on the NBA Finals last year, guarding Tyler Hero in very important parts of close games that the Lakers won in 6. And absent Caruso, who went undrafted, means 30 teams passed on him at least twice, and then no one offered him a two-way deal right away. The Lakers could have lost that series, and Alex Caruso, even with AD and LeBron and Rondo, right? And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a lottery pick. Caruso was a huge difference maker. And I just think too many of those guys are left unseen.
Well, such great points. And it doesn't just apply, obviously, at the college or the NBA level. This applies at the youth level as well. And why do we lose sight of the fact that skill can trump most things when you combine it with, as you say, jazz?
Oh, I don't know the answer to why they do it, but you're definitely right.
The hypothetical, right?
Yeah. I was talking to this owner yesterday, who's a close friend of mine. And he was asking, like, what are we doing wrong? Because I don't want to run an international team. I'm not moving anywhere. My family's based here. My parents are here. My mother-in-law lives here. They're all 5 minutes away. And my kids are freshmen in college in Florida schools. I'm not going anywhere. But he asked me to look at his roster and said, you have one guy makes 37% of his threes, one guy makes 35, and nothing. No one else shoots threes, and don't even shoot that many threes to begin with. Meanwhile, your top two competitors have 6 guys and 5 guys at 35% or better. Like you've lost before you've started. In fact, I told him it's a miracle you're top 4. You don't have skill. I don't know what you're doing, but you don't have skill. And I feel like the teams that have recognized the value of skill, of pure skill, and then coaching around it, I think they're getting better. That's a good sign. I'll remind you of something. In my opinion, you and I are both of similar ages. So I can't speak with authority on the 70s Lou Alcindor teams, on the 60s Lou Alcindor teams, 70s Bill Walton teams. I love them, and when I look back and read books. But to me, the best team of my lifetime has been the Gator team that won back-to-back titles. And I'm biased because I went to school there long before they did. And I worked a lot with Joakim Noah and Corey Brewer. So yeah, I'm jaded that way. But I'm pretty much paid to be objective all the time. And so you can argue with me. They are the only team that went back-to-back, right? Since the early 90s when everything really changed. But on that team was a 2-guard named Lee Humphrey that I promise you, most schools were turning down because he's not a great athlete. And their point guard, Torian Green, if my memory serves, and I'm old, I don't think he was turning out a bunch of high major schools. And they won 3 SEC titles at a school that wasn't, I think they'd won 1 SEC title in history before them. They won 3 straight. People always forget that. Yeah, they won 2 NCAA tournaments when those big 3 with sophomores and juniors, but they won the SEC as freshmen. So they literally, Chris, lost 1 tournament game. I'm talking about holiday tournament, SEC tournament, NCAA tournament, 1 game in 3 years. And that was their second game their freshman year in the NCAAs. That's it. And it was with 2 guys that a lot of schools would pass up. And of course, 3 amazing players, none of which were great scorers. Corey Brewer, Al Horford, Joakim Noah. No one would list them in any list of scoring, right? And Corey was a McDonald's All-American. Joakim and Al Horford weren't. They got coached up. And I've talked to Joe, and I've talked to a number of players in that team. Lee Humphrey is someone they revere. Toughness, guarded the ball, shot the 3 great. And they knew how good he was and was fearless. And I just think in today's world, Lee Humphrey has a tough time getting a high major offer until maybe, July of after he graduates if someone has an opening. And that's a mistake. Same as Torian Green for that matter.
Such great points. And I love approaching it from this concept because we're going to get into what actually makes up player development. And specifically something that resonates with me that you talk about is the number one answer you give when someone asks you about getting more playing time. I always say, hey, it's simple, get more skilled. You go even more in depth and you talk about develop your weak hand. Can you share with us some of your insights about developing the weak hand?
Yeah, well, I thought you were going to say help your team win more, because that's really what I do say. Ultimately, we're supposed to try to help teams win, right? So at the pro level, especially, there's not a lot of time. They're not really patient with you typically. You better help your team. When I say win, I mean win the minutes you're on the court, right? We have metrics for all of that. But yeah, so the weak hand stuff, I mean, that's one of the few things. I didn't play past high school, and I was just an okay high school player. I actually got better when I left, when I graduated, went to college. But the one thing I was ambidextrous because my dad is a lefty, and I was right-handed, and I copied him. So I didn't even know. I use my left hand to this day, and around probably 8 feet, you wouldn't know if I was left or right-handed when I played. When I used to play horse with my 9-year-old son, I would only play left-handed, and he didn't understand why I didn't miss a whole lot from inside 15 feet because he didn't know what ambidextrous meant, right? So I knew it helped me a ton. I knew that you couldn't just force me left or force me to just finish left. And so it was a personal thing for me. And then I was lucky enough to coach my second year of high school coaching. I had a 6'6", 300-pound big guy named Dimitri Hill, who was an 8th grader then, who was coming to play for our team in St. Pete for high school for his 9th grade year. And Dimitri was a guy that you couldn't move at 6'6", 300, had the greatest hands to this day I've ever seen in my career. I mean, Chris Webber had great hands, and I saw Barkley play in college in person. He had great hands, but Dimitri had as good hands I've ever seen before. And I talked to Lon Kruger, and he would agree with me. Lon coached him then. And I just felt like he can't jump over anybody. We had all sorts of high major and mid-major talents in our area. I took him to camps all over the country, BC camp, 5-star camp. He wasn't going to be able to jump around people or use quickness, but I thought that if he could finish equally as adeptly with his weak hand and left hand, he'd be impossible to guard because you weren't going to take the ball from him at that weight and size and power. And it really worked. You couldn't, no matter what you wanted to force him to do, it was like, okay, like it didn't matter. There was a move, counter move, but the counter move was every bit as good as the regular move because they didn't care which hand he finished with. And that was 23 when that started happening. And I realized, all right, I've got to really double down on this. And so we made it a priority as a simple example. And I'm sure you have younger coaches listening. On our team, when I was the JV coach in the late 80s, when you attempted to make a play with your weak hand, including a finishing play, and you missed, we applauded you. We made it a big deal. Our bench had to stand up when you try to finish with your left hand. Now, to be fair, if we were down 1 with 3 seconds left, I probably would prefer to make the shot. I don't remember if it ever happened or not. But during the game, nope, if we miss, we miss. But my job was to create them, to make better varsity players. So that was a passion of mine. And I helped with the varsity. I was as much a voice as their head coach we didn't even know was kind of suffering from cancer through much of my years there. He ended up dying from it after I left. But I just know I had to be really active because he wasn't always feeling it. And there's no question it helped our players so much. And then fast forward many years later, I was working with a player you probably have heard of named Chris Carrawell. Chris was a first-team All-American at Duke, McDonald's All-American from Cardinal Ritter in St. Louis. And Chris could not finish with his left hand. I was astounded at that. And I coach a lot of Duke players. I don't at all denigrate anything Duke is doing, that's for sure. But I realized that at the college level, they're really playing chess with pieces that they know are rooks and pawns and knights and not knights, bishops. Like, okay, Mike Krzyzewski, you gave him a jigsaw puzzle and he built the best masterpiece he could. And I thought the NBA is not going to do that. They will if once you've established yourself, but until you establish yourself, they won't. So you better be versatile. And then once they figure out a role for you, well, they may be stuck just in that role. But to get there is hard. So like with Udonis, he already had a great left hand, but it's the same idea here. I thought we had to make him a much better rebounder. And so we really focused on rebounding, even though he couldn't shoot. I told him, I don't care if you can't shoot. No one's going to let you shoot anyway. You're an undrafted player. Rebound and play defense. Once you make it doing that, shooting will get us paid. We'll make the league as a rebounder and defender and a leader and a tough guy, but we'll get paid because you can make the 18-foot shot, which back then in 2003 is what power forwards typically did, except for Dirk. And it works. And so I think the weak hand is the easiest thing to do of those things I just talked about. It's hard to get better rebounding, especially when you're undersized. It's hard to get better at a lot of things. Weak hand development's a cinch. It's easy. You just got to spend time on it every day, like a plant needs water. And if you do it, I think you'll see an immediate improvement in your game.
Hey, Coach, I know I've told you about this before, but BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Football might be over, but NBA, college basketball, and the NHL are in full swing. BetOnline even covers award shows, TV, and reality TV. Real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine. BetOnline has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's free to sign up. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your sports book experts. Please use promo code ARMCHAIR at checkout. Well, I want to circle back to something that the coaches, I hope they noticed you said this, that when you were talking about shaping the left hand or weak hand in a player, the number one thing you said was, first of all, we created a safe environment for it to happen. And then the second thing is you noticed it, you celebrated it, regardless of outcome. And that's definitely a challenge for coaches, is that we evaluate too much based just on outcome when we talk about development, right?
100% right. I have a chapter in my book. I think it's called Standing Ovations for Turnovers. It's been 4 years now since I first published it, so I forget sometimes the chapters, but Standing Ovations for Turnovers. So in our gym, when we're doing player development stuff, with like say, for example, ball handling, we have, and whoever's in the gym with me as a coach, a staff member, we are erupting with applause when you try really hard and fail. I know you've talked to Ryan Pannone, who worked for me for a long time, 14 years, whatever it was. I don't know how long, but it was over a decade. And we're still super close now. He knows, like we made it a big deal. You had to feel safe to make the mistake. Now, keep in mind, I wasn't coaching them in game. These are pros who played for other people. But if you're not going to make the mistake in practice, you're not going to ever be good enough to even try to move in a game, because that's what informs your practice habits, right? In fact, games should be what informs the curriculum for your practice the next day, not just at the team level. Of course, that seems obvious. You have a bunch of turnovers against the diamond press. You probably should spend some time the next day dealing with the diamond press. But I'll bet you it's not just schemes, right, that are beating you when a team is pressing you to death. It's your lack of skill and fundamental or knowledge of how to play. And I've been lucky enough to coach very high-level high school players we won national championships and state championships. And I didn't do much work because the guys could all just really play. And then it was easy. It didn't matter what you did. Our guys could figure stuff out. That's fun. I got the credit. I didn't do any of the work. The kids all knew how to play. They weren't my players. But when they are my players, that's different. But they were just like an all-star group. You've got to let them fail. You've got to let them understand what they're doing wrong, because that's what they should be working on. And that's, just so you know, that is exactly what we do with our pros. Like literally last night in the NBA game, a client of mine, he just had a little floater. He's a brilliant 3-point shooter, and he pulled the string on his floater. And of course, he missed it really short. So I talked to him about it, and I said, I don't know if I want this in your head because you have a game tonight. And he said, no, send it to me. I want to see it. I'm visual anyway. And I said, okay, make sure you get a bunch of these before your game tonight. And that's common. This is what we do when they make mistakes. See it, and they address it so that the next day they won't make the same mistake. And whatever that mistake might be, we're going to, they may make it more than once, but the best players tend to move beyond their some mistakes pretty quickly and don't do it nearly as often. The lesser players tend to make the same mistakes more often, right? So that's our job as coaches, to point out where we can get better tomorrow at practice after a game.
Well, that also speaks to the intent of the player, which is their intent to improve, which is something that you and others have helped instill in a player. And that's our job as a coach, right? To instill this desire to improve. And you talked about winning. Like, ultimately, the goal is winning. I feel as a coach, our goal is to help our team win and to help our players improve, because more players would be retained in the game if they notice themselves improving. Is that fair to say?
Oh, sure. I want to take it to a macro level, though.
Please.
I think our job is to help players fall in love with the sport, because it's a necessary ingredient to being good at it is to really work, with very rare exceptions, and those exceptions tend to look like LeBron James. And if they look like LeBron James, they don't really love the sport, they won't be as good as LeBron James. All right. Our job is at the rec level is to cast as wide a net as possible to get kids in our gym and try to get every one of them to love it so much they can't wait to come back again. And so that's where it starts, is you better fall in love with the sport. So what are we doing, right? I define leadership as breathing spirit into the hearts and minds of others. And so that's step one as a coach, quite frankly, in my opinion, as a husband. Been married 31 years. I would hope my wife would say, I don't always succeed at this, but I try to breathe spirit into her life. And I'm not a religious man. I'm not talking about anything to do with God. I'm talking about my job as husband to make her feel seen and loved and valued and heard, right? And then I got to do the same thing with my kids, who are twins. My twins, boy, girl, are away in college. My son is at Florida State as a basketball player. He plays tomorrow at 12:45, and we'll be watching closely. My daughter, his twin sister, is a student at UCF, studying at the famed Rosen College for hospitality. And my job is to breathe as much spirit into them as I can when I don't get to see them, because they're not here anymore. And so if we do that as coaches, it's just, everything is easier after that. Everything is easier when they know you have their back, you want them to succeed, you're with them. And then, to your point, a player seeking out that guidance, right? Being self-accountable. That's what probably separates most pros. Most pros blame themselves first and want to get better and aren't afraid of work and aren't afraid of struggle and aren't afraid of criticism. They welcome it. They want it. They would get angry with me if I wasn't truthful. I don't typically tell them they played badly. I normally will be more, I'll be sober and accurate, but also be pragmatic. But if they just played a colossally terrible game in the NBA, pretty obvious when you do, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say, you suck tonight. What was going through your head? I had a guy make a foul last night. I told him after the game, I said, I'm so happy you did that crazy, stupid foul, because it's been weeks since you've made a defensive error mentally. This guy's one of the top defensive players in the NBA. And I had gotten spoiled. I was so used to him never making a mistake on defense. And he made 2 last night, and he was so upset. I said, you know what? Good. Now let's go on a long streak again of making no mistakes at all. Now this guy's he's not a kid anymore. He's a veteran who knows how to play. But our job is to create that environment where they just can't wait to come. They can't wait to work. Just like as a dad or a mom, you want your child away. I never had to tell my son to go work on his basketball at 6 a.m. I never once woke him up, ever. I created a culture. I tried with my wife to create a culture where that was valued. If you love doing it, go do it. Don't think you'll be successful if you don't work, but you're allowed to go work. It's within your wheelhouse to do that. So that was our job. And so I think that's what we should be focused on most of all, is creating a culture where these guys and girls want to just keep trying to get better and not be afraid to fail, because the game is built. Errors are built into the game. Failure is built in. So, if you're missing 6 of 10 threes in the NBA, you're an elite shooter. Not as elite as it used to be because there's more of them, but you're still an elite shooter. 40% is mine and goes a line. So you better be able to deal with missing 6 of 10. And if you can do that, then you understand how the process works, and that's important.
I love that. I love breathing spirit into them. And that's such a great lesson. And we talked a little bit about skill, but one of your mottos is develop your game, not just your skills. So can you talk about that in terms of the overall picture of development?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we just launched an app at theprotrainingscenter.com. It's in beta, but we've got a lot of guys trying it and seem to be happy with it. And the whole idea is to it's my voice and it's our curriculum. It's my pros in the videos and teaching and walking through the workout, because it's a scripted workout. It's not you choose what to do. No, we tell you what to do. It's our curriculum. But the whole idea is to learn how to play the game better, when to use a certain move, how to use a certain move, when do you use the counter, how do you set your guy up. I feel like player developers now, and Chris, most people think that I'm the first guy to do this in America, if not the world. Right? I don't know. How would you possibly know in 1993 if anyone else was doing it? There was no internet. I know at 5-star I was the only guy that was doing it, and no one else ever said to me, hey, I've got a guy like you where I live. And I never once thought about the tricks. I just thought about, how do I help guys play better so they win more games and their teammates will like what they see and want to come train with me and build my business that way. Nothing's changed. My job with NBA players now, or I have high-level guys in Europe too, it is not to teach them a trick. It teach them how to win games. How do you, I call it the second box. So I think of the paint, think of the key, and from the rim to maybe 7, 8 feet out is the first box in the paint, and the second box is up to the free throw line. And so we really work with our guys on battling like crazy to get to the second box, and then read the game. Read the first box, read the help. You got to get to the second box and read. Don't probe baseline. I always say the baseline is death. Attack middle, attack middle, attack middle, and then read. I talked to a player yesterday, a 2-time player of the year in a very good conference in America, who's little. And he called me yesterday for some guidance about playing overseas. And I watched tape on him, and I told him, you get to the first box way too much. And he didn't know what the first box meant, but I explained it to him. And I said, you're too little. And the league's just, where you're going next is just taller guys. You got to develop, Mike Conley's got the best floater in the game, and it's with his weak hand. His right-hand floater might be the best floater in the game. For a decade, it's been that way. And because he can't get to the rim all the time and score. So don't keep doing it. You get no points for getting a shot off. They don't foul you. You got to make it. And it's hard to make it against these tall guys. So you got to get the second box. So, the step back 18-footer is just almost without question a bad shot for all but maybe 3 people on the planet. So why are you doing it? How do we earn open shots? What else are we trying to do but get open shots for ourselves or a teammate? That's how you win games. You don't win games by taking contested shots almost anywhere, to include the post. So that's what we try to do with our curriculum, with our app, as well as in my gym. When I talk to players on the phone, it's only at the NBA, it's really easy. We have such advanced metrics that I can just look at. There's a website I use called dunksandthrees.com, which NBA analysts tell me, NBA stat number guys for the league, for teams, have told me it's the best analytical site out there, dunksandthrees.com. And so they have a projection rating for offensive, defensive metrics. And so that's what I use for players. And so I don't care if you got a steal and a block and this, that, whatever. Where are numbers as it relates to the rest of the league on offense and defense? And if you can be on the court and your team can be better when you're on the court than off, you're building value. They can be much, much better. You're building more value. And that does not just come from ball handling tricks and shooting tricks. It's important to be able to make shots. It's important to be able to do the Euro steps and all those kind of things. Don't get me wrong. We do all of them. All those are weapons, as is ball handling, to get to the second box and to beat pressure and all of that. But ultimately, you got to do it not just productively, but efficiently. And that's where I think most of the numbers are lost. Is they're not people love what LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards look like. They're both horrendous defensive players right now. They may get better at defense, and if they do, great. But if you don't get good at defense, well, you have to be a top 5 percentage off. In other words, 95th percentile on offense to really be a difference maker. Damian Lillard, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, those guys. They can be bad defensive players and get away with it because their offense is so elite. Ball might get there. He might get there. We don't know. It's too early. We'll see. I would never judge a rookie good or bad after just 40 games. But they've got to get better on defense. And that's part of it too, is we address defense in our stuff. In fact, we do ball handling and attacking moves with our bigs because we think it helps them play defense better against perimeter-based players, which when everyone switches, they see more. So that's all part of the curriculum. You've got to develop the whole game. And you also have to learn, we do a lot of work on dribble handoff, even by yourself in a driveway. Our drills are based on, imagine you're playing with, they call it the get game. I call it Spurs action because the first team I thought did it was the Spurs. But they call it the get game where you throw it to someone and go chase it or then, refuse it and go back door. We practice that all the time. And then you get to learn to play with other people. And so that's all built into our curriculum as well. It's super important. It's not one game. It's not 5 games of one-on-one anymore like it was in the 80s and 90s because of the illegal defense rules in the NBA. It's 1 game of 5-on-5. It's always been that way for high school and college. And so guys have to learn how to play the game and not just how to play solo.
It's great to get your perspective on these things. And one thing that you talked about, develop your game, focuses on skill and athletic development working together. And I've heard you talk about this on podcasts and in some of your articles. And specifically, one thing that you've mentioned, which I want you to address here, is this concept of changing directions and sudden stops and starts. Can you talk about how important that is to player development?
Yeah, what a great question. Thank you. Well, I don't claim to be a genius, but I'm really good, really, really, really good, because I'm old, at identifying genius. And right now, the 2 best guys in the league at sudden stops and sudden starts are Luka Doncic and James Harden. So if you can't copy what those guys are doing, you're not paying attention. Because neither of them are elite athletes, although Harden's a pretty damn good athlete. But he's not in Russell Westbrook's league. But nobody can guard those guys because they're just sudden stuff. And this is documented, by the way. I talked to the guys who run P3 in Atlanta, Santa Barbara and Atlanta. Dr. Marcus Elliott, the founder there, he's an incredible guy. And so he confirmed that they're the highest they've ever tested for the quickest of stopping and starting again. So if it's good enough for those guys, how are we not doing it? So yeah, we really focus on sudden starts and stops almost every day with our handle. And we mix it up a lot of different ways to how we get into it, what we do with the ball, through a leg, behind our ankles, crossing over, hesitate, all those kind of things. But the idea, so defensively, we want to force offensive players into an area or into a side if they're one-hand dominant. And we want to be able to gauge their speed. And so offensively, if we don't let our defender know where we're going, know when we're stopping or starting, know when we're changing direction, we become much harder to guard. So those sudden starts and stops throw our defender's rhythm completely off. It's why I also teach, I call it the freeze fake. I don't think there's another name for it. A shot fake to me is ball gets above your head. A freeze fake is, I call it chest to chin. It just freezes the defender. I copied it from Dirk Nowitzki because you couldn't block his shot unless you timed it up right because it's 7 feet tall. So he would just go a little freeze fake, I called it. He would freeze the defender and then he kind of owned it. And he might shot fake after that. He might shoot, he might drive, whatever he wanted. So we do a lot of freeze fakes in our workouts because it freezes the defender. So does the stopping suddenly move. And then you don't have to start suddenly if you don't want to. It's pretty explosive if you do, but you also want to mix up how fast you restart. Because again, the whole idea is to throw the rhythm and timing, right? Same thing with the freeze fake. Guy's closing you out and you freeze fake and he stops. Well, you've just blown his timing to go contest your shot. That's the genius move.
I love this. And I love this discussion because these are some under-taught and under-understood concepts that lead to success for players. And I love that P3 example to just be able to drive it home as well. And you also mentioned defense in our last conversation. So I'm curious from your perspective, is the modern NBA player more aware of their defensive efficiencies because of defensive analytics and the more value we put behind analytics?
For sure. Go watch a game in the 80s and laugh at the idea that there was handshaking. Nobody was guarding anybody. Go watch. They were playing defense. Nobody could shoot.
I can picture it, Coach. I can picture it.
Yeah, nobody was shooting out there. No one guarded you until you got to the paint. Now, did they want to ride you out a little bit in the paint? Sure. It happens now. Nothing's changed. They might call more fouls now. I'm not arguing with that. But defenders are also way better at kind of getting away with, because they have to be. They know they can't just club a guy. But the defense, just the intensity wasn't the same. You couldn't even help until the guy you wanted to help already had the ball and he was at a certain point on the court. Unless it was an all-out double, there was no shading. I mean, it's a joke compared to what they do now. And I think metrics, I can speak from experience. I had a player hire me simply because he was going to get rotation minutes because of his offensive talent, and his defense apparently was terrible. And he called his aide. He said, "I need help. I don't know what to do. No one's coaching me. This is the NBA. They don't really coach you up on that. They just go to the next guy." And he's like, "I don't want to blow this chance," because he is a great shooter. And the agents called me, and I taught him how to play blackjack on defense. And that's just, everything is about probability, right? You want to live with the good result. If you're a dealer at blackjack, if you're the house, and you can get everyone to have to, you're showing basically a 7, 8, 9, or 10 on a base card as the dealer, as the house, and you can keep throwing 16s out to the people playing, you're going to be the richest casino of all time. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to force the player we're guarding to hit on 16. And he's going to hit some, for sure. He's going to hit some. And we cannot let that affect us emotionally, which is what happens typically with players, especially young players. As I teach my offensive players against young players, when you make a shot, the very next time you attack that player, make sure you fake him first, because he is going to be so fired up to stop you the next time. You'll get him there and you get him to foul you. And that's our number one goal, is to get to the free throw line, right? Our number one goal is always to get fouled shooting a three. It's the single best play in basketball offensively in terms of probability of scoring, and single worst play defensively, right? If you look at the metrics of it. So that's what we want to do, is get fouled shooting a three. So against a young player, if we make a three, one of my players makes a three on him, we're going to fake him the next time, get him up in the air and draw the foul. Try to get 3 free throws. Same thing for 2, right? Same thing on a move you make. If you beat him on a crossover the next time, hit him with a hezzy, because he's expecting the cross and he's going to sit on that cross. The young player is. The veteran player, the one that understands how to play blackjack, has a plan. And he's going to try to force you individually, and then of course you've got to think about the scheme for the team, into the shot you practiced the least or made the least on a consistent level, and live with the result and not get so emotional the next time. When you make 2 or 3 in a row, yeah, probably switch it up. Don't jump in the air and get caught for a foul, whatever. But like you can't let Dirk Nowitzki get comfortable doing a fadeaway from 12 feet, or any Anthony Davis. You've got to mix it up a little bit. The world's best players, it's a mistake to only play blackjack with them. But there's like 11 of those guys. The rest of the league, you can do that with. You can make them make the tough shot all the time, and they're just not going to do it. That's why they're not the best players in the world. And so I know for my son, it's something we talked about some, but at the high school level, they're so young. When you get to the college level and beyond, you got to really start thinking about how to play blackjack, and what can I do to make them take the shot they don't want to take, and then live with the result no matter how well they do.
Hey, Coach, I know I've told you about this before, but BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Football might be over, but NBA, college basketball, and the NHL are in full swing. BetOnline even covers award shows, TV, and reality TV. Real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine. BetOnline has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's free to sign up. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your sports book experts. Please use promo code ARMCHAIR at checkout. Hey, Coach, brief interruption to tell you about eBay sneakers. From rare dead stock to the latest release, you can find the exact sneaker you've been looking for on eBay. As the original sneaker marketplace, eBay is the place to go to get the pair you've been eyeing. And with eBay's authenticity guarantee, a team of independent professional authenticators perform a rigorous inspection of the sneakers you purchase before they're sent to you, so you can shop confidently knowing your pair is the real deal. And for the sneaker sellers out there, eBay has eliminated selling fees on sneakers $100 or more, making it free to sell or flip your collection. With other sites taking as much as 25%, you're going to have a lot of extra money left for more sneakers. Check out ebay.com/sneakers today. So it strikes me as you're talking about trainer culture, and this is going to be a broad statement. I don't necessarily like broad statements, but the one thing I noticed from having seen trainers work out with players is there's very little attention to defense. And the number one way to be able to develop defense is to play defense. But because trainer culture is so focused on developing offensive skill, are we losing sight of the fact that you develop defense by playing defense? So there's less one-on-one, there's less offense versus defense. There's all these things are happening less because of the really what sells for a trainer.
Well, I really can't speak to what sells for a trainer other than I know what's worked for me. And I'll tell you a story you'll appreciate. For a long time, a decade, I worked with an NBA player named Omi Caspi, starting his rookie year. And then later in his career, he had fought hard times. He came back to me, and Omi's now playing for Maccabi Tel Aviv because he makes a whole bunch of money in Israel. And he's got 2 kids, and he wanted to be in his home country. So early in Omi's career, when I wasn't working with him, I noticed that you attacked him defensively, he really opened up his hips and let you attack him and then slid his feet. And I had Ryan Pannell working for me, and I said, Ryan, Omri is an elite athlete. He's one of the fastest players in the league. He's got extraordinary lateral quickness and coordination for a guy who's legit 6'10". He's a guard. He can flip his hips the way a cornerback does in football. And so we've got to work with him on not opening his hips so much. He could slide his feet against these guys. And so we practiced it. That's all we did. We didn't have an offensive guy doing it. I don't allow competition in my workouts. I would if I was a high school coach, I guess, but I can't afford my pros to get hurt. So my job is to simulate game intensity, game speed, and remove all the risk of turning ankles and bumping knees. And so we just had to simulate quick closeout and then slide, and watch their hip movement. And we showed them film. And literally the next year after we did this, for most of the year anyway, I think he dropped off the last couple of weeks in part because his team was just so terrible and they just had no energy because they were in the playoffs. I believe he was the 3rd rated small forward behind LeBron and KD. I might have been 4th behind Paul George too, I don't remember. But he was top 5, elite. And I could tell a million of those kind of stories. You have to coach those things and you have to make them aware of it, right? And you have to drill it. And you have to, but I think the awareness part is the bigger issue. I actually think it's easier to do the physical thing. I think where most coaches and trainers probably fail is they don't make their client aware or the player aware of the problem. And it's part of our job is to shed light on the weakness, right? You can't plug a leak. You know where the leak is. So you got to show them the leak and then you got to teach them how to fix it. So the other thing I would say is for big guys, for those young, if anyone's listening to this that wants to one day maybe coach in the NBA, the first job I ever turned down for an NBA job, because it wasn't what I wanted to do. I'll name names because I talked to him about it. Dwayne Casey. I didn't know Dwayne. I love him now. He called me one day and he said, he introduced himself and he said, I'm calling you because our GM at the time, his name is Brian Colangelo, said, you won't come work for us. And I said, and he said, no matter what. And I said, let me try. So he called me and said, I want to hire you because I watched Solomon Alabi play for Florida State. And because Leonard Hamilton was with me at Kentucky. That's my guy. And I know Solomon, they were amazing with Leonard and protected the paint, all of that. But he wasn't agile. And he said, I just watched him do a mini camp where he destroyed Ed Davis, who ended up becoming a client of mine too. And I don't know what happened. This is not the player I ever saw in college. What did you do? Those guys are great play developers. And yeah, we know what Florida State does. But it wasn't their job to help him get way better on the perimeter. Back then, he was just protecting the rim all the time. He was great at it. He was 7 feet tall. And so Coach Casey asked me what I did. And I said, we treated him like a guard. We made him move his feet all the time with the ball on the perimeter. And just to fast forward that, I had a player in the G League bubble who moved from, he was one of the best centers in the G League last year. And this past year in the bubble for the month, he played small forward. And he said, Coach Thorpe, I always believed you when you said all the work we're doing with perimeter stuff is going to help my defense. He said, but I didn't really think about it. I just trusted you. But I'm realizing you're 100% right. I'm guarding guys. And because I spent so much time working on my attack skills, even though I knew I'd never do it in the game, I got my dribble got better, my hands got better, all those things got better. But I started thinking like a guard more. And I realized I can read them so much better. And I said, the other thing you did is, because I watched him play, is you moved your feet more than a slide or two better than you used to do. Because big guys tend to only slide twice and they kind of stop. I learned that from Lon Kruger. He used to do a drill called a slide, where he worked with his players on hedging ball screens, and they had to yell out loudly, slide, every time, as a mental note of making sure you take the third slide. It's why I think guys like Joakim Noah and Anthony Davis have a huge advantage when they first get to the NBA. They were guards growing up. They're used to moving their feet more in space. And that's why it's exciting for the NBA when you've got the James Whitesons and all these guys that can really move. They're already switching now. They're 20 years old and switching into space. They're not good at it now. They will be. They don't have it boiled into their DNA that they can't move their feet. They can. So our job is to help all these guys understand they can do stuff in space, no matter what they're using with their team. Our job is to prepare them for the next team, right? If these guys want to play in college, we have to make them more valuable. And my guess is, I've worked in gyms where I had a basket with a pro guy just doing a little work, and I'd watch a trainer work with 5, 6, 7 guys, and I never say a word. But my pros have often said, how is that guy not just asking you if he can just take notes or film what we're doing? Because all the shit they're doing, we've never done with you one time. And we would never do those things in the game. We get paid to play. And I didn't really have an answer for it. I don't know what they're doing. I know that I have lots of coaches who seem to like to come to my workouts and take it back to their high school teams. But most trainers, I tend to think that they feel like they've got their own innovative style, and that's fine. But I don't think they're addressing those kinds of things, and they probably should be.
They probably should be. And what strikes me also hearing you talk is your understanding that development is not linear. Development's non-linear, and that it's a process over time. Can you talk to that piece a little bit so that we can understand a little bit more your process?
Yeah, sure. So I actually, I'll first start with an interesting thing I noticed when we were raising our twins. We noticed that when they made a cognitive leap in some aspect of their life, maybe it was going from baby food to solid food, or it was crawling, or think of all the things our children do when they make a big leap. It seemed to always be combined with a step backwards somewhere else. We didn't see it at first, but eventually we realized, you know what? This is like the 5th time they've made a big step forward. Now they're going backwards. And so, for example, when they were potty trained, which we did over a week during spring break when they were not yet 3, because they were going to nursery school twice a week for 2 hours a day, we were prepared at this point because they were chewing babies. So in the spring, we realized, okay, we're going to potty train them, and we know they're going to go backwards somehow. So we really focused on not letting them slip backwards too much. It's the same thing with players. There's no such thing as mastering this. Okay, the box is checked. I'm good with that forever. It's not like riding a bike. It doesn't work that way. You don't work on your shot for a while, it's going to get worse. You don't work on your handle for a while, it's going to suffer. Okay. So contrary to that, it would be when they do make that big leap and also will have maintained all the other things that they've been doing, well, you're going to see a big jump. Sometimes it's just knowing the game. Sometimes it's adding one really good scoring weapon, and now you can play off it. Sometimes just understanding of where to be, like James Wiseman for the Warriors is the way I describe it is, you remember the game Frogger?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So the NBA for James Wiseman, he's the frog on a 5-lane highway, but all 5 lanes are trying to crash into him. That's hard. They're going 100 miles an hour, and they all want to hurt him. And the other 4 guys in his team would like him to figure it out and stay in his lane, but they got their own stuff to worry about too. It's hard. It's a hard game. So as the game slows down, you start reading the game more. You start seeing the patterns of the game, the pace of the game. You start anticipating much better. He doesn't anticipate much right now. The game gets much, much easier. And then you can really start seeing his talent beyond, the occasional thing. He had 3 games in a row this past week, and now he's hurt his wrist a little bit. It's going to set him back. But yeah, the problem I think is we want it to be linear, like we're climbing a mountain. And so we get frustrated when that doesn't happen, and the player feels that. And our job is to respirit and to make sure they know, no, this is how it goes. There's no other way but this way. This is the way. Like, Jerry Seinfeld is, right?
Yep.
So Jerry Seinfeld has an amazing documentary that every single basketball coach should watch. It's called Comedian, and it's 20 years old. And it's a little bit of his story in comedy, but it also tells the story of a young comedian who's trying to make it. And at this point, Jerry Seinfeld is the most famous comedian, maybe of all time, certainly the best revenue maker, because the show was pretty much already done. And it was the biggest revenue maker ever for a comedian. And this young comedian, who's not that young, but it's his 30s, he says, like, don't you just want to, spike the ball in a sense and say touchdown and call your mom and dad and you've done it. And he looks at him like he's got 3 heads. And Seinfeld's like, no, like that isn't the way this game is played. It's brutal. It's you're gonna get heckled, you're gonna fail, you're gonna bomb. Comedy is hard. A professional comedian is hard. It never stops. It doesn't matter if I'm famous. If they don't laugh, they don't enjoy themselves, they're not gonna bring me back. Like it's a brutal business. That's exactly how I feel our business is. It is hard. And you're dealing at the NBA level with the best players in the world, the best athletes in the world, motivated, competitive beasts. They just want to work and crush you. And if you aren't steely enough to deal with that, then don't complain about the profession. Find another one, because that's how this profession is. And the problem I have with that is that isn't the way it should be at the high school level. And I'm incredibly disappointed in a huge percentage of the high school coaches that I've seen, both ones that have coached my son and coached against my son, that act as if these players work for these coaches, and completely ignorant of the fact that these guys get 4 years and that's it. And that's their only 4-year experience they're ever going to have in high school. And these coaches can coach for 40 years if they want to, literally 40 years plus. And the arrogance and laziness of most of these guys who want you to bend to their will and do it their way, even though they may not have gone to a clinic in 30 years or studied a game in 20. I'll ask you this, Chris. Do I sound like someone that hasn't studied the game a little bit?
Absolutely not. It sounds like you're still studying the game every second.
That's